We'll go ahead and get started. We're joined by Councilor Walsh, as well as Councilor Williams, Councilor Letterman, Councilor Ramos, and Councilor Gomez. I also see Peter Goonan and Paul Tuthill on the line as well. In the Situation Room, we're joined by Commissioner Helen Carlton Harris, Solicitor Ed Pakula, CAFO TJ Plant, as well as Commissioner Cheryl Clapprood, and then Tom Ash. So we'll start as we normally do. I didn't look for Brendan to see whether I had to go ahead to get started. He does say you're good to go. So we're getting better in terms of being in sync. So I appreciate you, Brendan. So Commissioner, we will start with you. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning. Oh, you're talking to me, Commissioner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will do my report and then I will exit the room if that's all right with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the update, as you know, the confirmed cases are 72,025. The new cases, and we're talking about the Commonwealth, the new cases, 1,754 in the Commonwealth yesterday. Hampden County is 4,321. The city of Springfield, as of yesterday, 1,602, which is 37% of the total in Hampden County. As you all know, I'm continuing to stay with the numbers that we pull off versus converting to what the Commonwealth is putting out for the city of Springfield. The reason for that is we have found some data differences, and so I'm preferring at this point to stay with our numbers. If in fact that changes, I will reconcile at some point, and you all will know about that. There were 208 deaths yesterday. The number of confirmed deaths in the Commonwealth, 4,420. The number of deaths in long-term care facilities was 2,653. 60% of the deaths that happen in the Commonwealth are at our long-term care facilities. In Hampden County, there were 425 deaths. The city of Springfield currently has 24 deaths. I do not have the race and ethnicity of those deaths at this point. When I have them, I will make sure I'm communicating that. However, a little over 0.5% of the deaths that happened in Hampden County happened in the city of Springfield. So the majority of those deaths are not ours. The average age for positives, as you say, are 53. The average age for hospitalization, 68. And the average age for deaths are 82. As you know, yesterday I issued regulations for the wearing of face coverings in the city of Springfield. That guidance has been published, and I will send each of you a copy of the document so you have an opportunity to look at what we put out. The good news, and also in that document is enforcement, and you probably read some of the enforcement guidance in the newspaper article, but that is the enforcement plan is in the document. Again, I will get that out to you, counselors. The shelter update, and you probably read the amazing news that 131 individuals that we tested in our homeless shelter who were from Friends of the Homeless all tested negative. That is amazing, and I really wish the newspaper had done a better job, Peter, of I mean, that is amazing based on the fact that we know that 45% of the individuals in Worcester tested positive. We know that over 30% of the individuals in Boston tested positive. The fact that we in the city of Springfield can say that in that setting, Friends of the Homeless, no one tested positive is an amazing accomplishment to the prevention and intervention we've done as a city. So I think that that's an important. However, Taylor Street, we tested 38. 2 of those, 1 came back positive, 1 is presumptive, which means we're just waiting for those results. They are looking positive, but they're going to run some additional, not tests, but they're going to rerun that just to make sure that it's negative or positive. So I think that is really important. I will also tell you that as far as the deaths are concerned, statewide 5.5% are Latino. 5.4% are Black. I use the term Black and brown, and I'll tell you why. Because I hear from the Asian community, I hear from multiracial individuals that they don't see themselves when you say Latinx and when you say Black. And so I usually use the word brown only because people know that they're brown. Also, Native Americans also are not seeing themselves in some of the language we're using. So that's why I use that term, and I just wanted to make sure I was communicating that to you. Two, I had my staff call the Spanish radio station to set up a time for my Spanish speakers to go to the radio station. I should say to you all that that station did not call my staff back. I just wanted to put that out there because I do not ever want there to be a time where anybody says we did not try to do that outreach. We did. And her name is Shirley LeBron. She works with me, as well as Chris Mary Gonzalez, who works with me, have been calling to try to set that up, and that has not happened. We are standing up Sear Arena as a backup site for storm emergency. That is ready to go. And so should we need to have an alternate site based on whether that is the place that we will use. We have also made sure that we're working again with the individuals down at the tented shelter. Right now, there are 9 people there. All 9 people are from the rescue mission. We've tested them yesterday. And so if those tests come back negative today, we will not have anyone in our shelter down on Worthington Street. That concludes my report, counselors. Happy to take any questions if you have them.
Commissioner, did you say you had to leave, Commissioner?
Well, no, I don't have, I mean, I can stay. I just don't want anybody yelling at me. I'm very sensitive today. But I just wanted you all to know, no, I may not be here when you talk to the, when you do the police update, just so you know, I may transition at that point, but no, that's fine.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we do things a bit differently? And maybe this will be a trend from this point forward. Does anyone have any questions for Helen?
I do.
You can raise your hand in the queue. I think there are some people that have their hands raised, but we'll start with you, Kateri, since you vocalize.
Let me just unmute this. Helen, thanks for the report. I'm curious, with the statistics you gave, are there any young people that are affected? Because I know we're starting to read about some very young people getting the virus.
The Commonwealth reports under the age of 19, and under the age of 19, I believe there are 682 individuals under the age of 19. That may have been updated today, but yes, we do have data around under the age of 19. Yes, we are hearing about, and I've read many articles about different health challenges young people are having right now, and that's being related to COVID-19. So we do have data for under the age of 19, counselor.
Now, are those just cases that tested positive, or those deaths?
Those are patients that tested positive. I don't believe, and I'll go in and look to see if there's any deaths under the age of 19, but it appears to me that would have been a reported story for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have heard about deaths around the country, obviously, of individuals, but those have also been very few, but I do not believe there have been any deaths under the age of 19 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. I see Councilor Gomez hand raised in the queue, followed by Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Council President Hurst. Commissioner Harris, I think that statistic that you had gave us of from the homeless shelter is a statistic that should be publicized and shown, that regardless of, you know, the council's constructive criticism, your good work and everybody's good work there at the Friends of the Homeless, of, you know, when we needed people locked down, showed that, you know, their job was done correctly before we could get this ball rolling, which I knew that was a trying time. So with that, my hat goes off to everybody there at the shelter and you guys. And I know that, you know, consistent testing after the time goes on, we can expect that. But for the most part, I'm very happy with those results. I'm very happy with what you have presented to us. My only question specific to is with the governor's order that was that went into effect yesterday. A week ago, the stance of the city of Springfield was that when I asked why didn't we mandate face coverings, we thought that it was okay that the advisory was already initiated, and it was thought that, you know, which nobody on the council presumably was saying that we were for the enforcement or the harassment of, you know, police going out of their way to make sure that people are wearing the mask. So I was very happy to hear that the commissioner said that we're going into an educational campaign on face covers or face covers or masks. But my question is the position of the city after the fact that the mayor, the governor the day after position that the advisory was still necessary versus that now a week later, you know, from what we heard from the mayor's office on the update on Monday, from a couple days, you know, because it just seems that sometimes, you know, we kind of, you know, are constructively trying to be proactive and work, but essentially from night to day, from the information and the updates that are given from this administration till now, specifically, not, I'm just using this as an example because you have to leave, but, you know, is it the case that, you know, we from a week ago that our position is that the advisory was necessary versus the mandatory order from the governor?
The governor has made it mandatory. Therefore, cities and towns across the Commonwealth must comply with the governor's order, and that's why we issued regulations yesterday. We always believed that it should be an advisory and that individuals should be able to self-certify as far as masks were concerned. We were concerned about the things that we're seeing across the country, the violence that's happening, the concern that's happening as far as people being ordered to wear masks to go into places that are essential businesses. And so we really wanted to do it in a more cooperative measure. However, the governor has issued the guidance and the mandate, so we must follow it. I went to CVS, I went to Benson Bagels, I went to Walmart, and I went to Food Zone. And I can tell you that they are all attempting to follow the governor's guidance. To be honest with you, I was most impressed with Food Zone, where I thought that there may be some resistance to the guidance, but there was not. And so the 4 places I went into were really complying with the order. But I think to answer your question, once the governor puts out an order, as a municipality in the Commonwealth, we must follow the governor's order.
Which I really appreciate your answer. And, you know, it's just when some of us go to different stores, I know that Councilor William had kind of stated when he was going into a pharmacy and, you know, just early on, essentially in certain places where we can't social distance, I guess, like in those places that you had spoke of. And I know that you had issued some guidance yesterday. So I wanted to just close out that conversation from last week till now. Which I'm very happy that we have some kind of you know, mandate, but essentially I want to also just commend the commissioner to working it in a way of talking about doing an educational, because we are going to get some resistance, and I see it all the time, and it's just me walking the dog or, you know, working out there and just being happily just telling folks, hey, just make sure you wear your mask, and that's more of the reason why I ask is because I understand that some people, you know, there's different information going out there, but essentially to take a strong stance just to say, hey, it's important that we wear the mask. Obviously, we have something that came down from the governor now, but moreover, those other questions when it comes to enforcing and stuff is I'll talk to the commissioner about. But I appreciate and thank you for your update today. I'm really happy with the statistics specific to the homeless shelter, and also that you've issued some guidance on what it looks like for the stores in the city of Springfield yesterday. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. We're also joined by Councilor Edwards, Councilor Fenton, and Councilor Davila. Councilor Letterman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to everybody for being with us today. Commissioner, I just wanted to follow up on the report, which I did read relative to the results from the homeless triage center, and I agree. Those are excellent results, and we should be very relieved that we're not in the same position as some other communities across the Commonwealth. But I would also commend the department for moving forward with it, because had we not caught those two cases, we could have ended up in the same position. So through the proactive work of the department and the partners in it is what's keeping us in this position. With that said, I'm wondering if you can give us an update on what the future will hold for the triage center now that we've done the initial round of testing, and also the two individuals who did, or the one positive and the one presumptive positive. Are they recovering at the triage center, or have they been moved to a hospital setting?
So the two individuals we are housing at the Northampton center that was set up for COVID positives at this point. So those were those two individuals. The ones in the tent are individuals who have been in contact with those two persons. They are from the Taylor Street site. Again, we have tested them. We're waiting for the results. I have asked so we're working to make sure we're not introducing any new people into the population now that we know that 131 and the ones at Taylor Street have tested for the most part negative. We are going to move to the Mill Street site to test those individuals, but so currently we are housing PUIs, persons under investigation, at the tent.
And do we have any plans in the future to work with, say, Open Pantry or any of the individuals that are providing food to the homeless population to perhaps track down anybody who may want to be tested that's lacking shelter but isn't affiliated with Taylor Street or Friends of the Homeless?
Thank you for asking that question. And also thank you for your support, because you pointed out some areas that you thought were of concern as far as essential businesses, and we were able to follow up. So thank you for that as well. The City of Springfield has a contract. Open Door, Open Pantry are under an organization called SMOC, Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council. And so we have a financial relationship with Open Pantry and their case managers. So I see that as an extension of who we are as a health services. And so we are able to identify those individuals as well, Counselor.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner, and also for always being available. I know we talk throughout the week, and regardless of how busy you are, you've always been able to get in contact with us, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Justin, you're muted.
Sorry. Seeing no further questions for the commissioner, we will move on to Tom. Did you have an update for us, or did you want to point us in another direction?
We talked about having Pat here to talk about the phased-in reopening of our facilities. Unfortunately, he has a medical appointment. He won't be able to, but Helen and our department heads are working closely with Pat to come up with some guidelines and what that's going to look like in terms of taking temperatures at doorways coming in. But we'll elaborate on that and get that out to you, certainly prior to any reopening.
Thank you, Tom. Does anybody have any specific questions related to Tom and or the administration that they want to ask? I will, Counselor Davila.
I have a quick question.
And if I see Counselor Walsh and Counselor Williams, if you guys could just use the raise your hand button, that would be greatly appreciated.
I don't do that more.
Can we just have a quick technical break? And can somebody just explain to the counselors again who have forgotten where the raise your hand button is?
So members, if you're on a laptop or desktop computer, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a participants button. And if you click that participants button, you will then see in the at the bottom of the list of participants, the option to raise your hand. And if you click that, it'll indicate your hand is raised. If you unclick it, it will lower your hand, or if you click it again, I suppose. If you're on an iPad,
It's the same. It's the same as iPad.
You just click participants, and then you'll see the option at the bottom.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Councilor Walsh, I see you found the raise your hand button. So Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Williams, and then Councilor Walsh.
Thank you.
Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to all. Just want to follow up from last week, Commissioner Carlton, or the administration itself. I did notice the mayor did mention that we have 22 deaths in the city as a consequence of COVID-19. I don't see it on the website as it was discussed last week as of yet. I'm just wondering what is going to be the administration's preferred method of disseminating that critical information as well.
Yeah, we are going to distribute that information at our Monday press conferences. It is not up on the website. Again, a part of that has to do with the fact, to be honest, we are still going through the death certificates in April, just to make sure we've captured everyone. The mayor said 22, we are now at 24. I just want to make sure, and I'm sure you'll understand this, Councilor, that whatever we put up on that website is as accurate as we know it to be. And so I'm hopeful by Monday, we will at least have those numbers that I can be confident we can share with our residents. Right now, that number is 24.
Yeah, I realize this is a moving target. And so whatever number, we have 1,600 cases according to the website today, but I'm sure it's more than that at this point. As it is a moving target. May I also suggest that besides doing it on Mondays, that as part of the Thursday update to the council, that we are giving that information as well.
Absolutely. I apologize because I thought I said it today and maybe I didn't.
It could be. I came in late, so.
No, yeah. That's fine. It could be my fault, and I take responsibility. But that number of deaths in the city is 24. And what I think I said is that I don't have the race and ethnicity of those deaths in the city yet, and that it was 0.5% of all the deaths in Hampden County, which equates to a little over 0.5% of those deaths in Hampden County belong to the city of Springfield at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Councilor Williams. Thank you, Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. I was wondering, Tom, if you can address, I was reading through a report this morning that was based on MGM Resorts International, where the acting chief, Bill Hornbuckle, had mentioned the fact that there probably is going to be coming down the pipeline thousands of layoffs, both internationally and as well as, of course, the United States. Of course, we have MGM Springfield right in our backyard. So I was wondering if you had heard anything through the grapevine, how that might affect our own casino moving forward. And I know, of course, there were some furloughed workers that presume to be coming back in the summertime, but of course, we don't know how this pandemic is going to continue to last throughout the summer. So I was just wondering if you had any details on how we might be affected.
Marcus, thank you. Eddie's been in contact with MGM much more regularly than Mayor's office has, so I'm going to let him address that.
Thank you.
Good morning. As you know, there's been a lot of back and forth over revenue issues, and we have an outstanding relationship with MGM. But we try to stay on top of what's going on that does affect our relationship. We know that there was an article, I don't think it was picked up locally, but in the Las Vegas newspaper, where there's been quite a high-level transition going on at a lot of the casinos there, where a number of the presidents of the various casinos have been let go, and it appears that there's been sort of a doubling up of jurisdiction of the presidents over various properties. That is part of what you've been talking about. We have had communication around that as to how it affects us. I have been informed that our president, Chris, is still here and is going to remain here. He does have some additional duties. I think that that's an indication of how well respected he is within the reorganization and how his track record and experience is valuable to the organization. And I think we can look at that as being valuable to us as well. There is an ongoing effort at MGM to make their plans. They have been in touch with the state, the various entities that would govern their reopening, whether it's the task force, whether it's the gaming commission. And so they are currently in that process. And while they do not have a date for reopening, that planning process is ongoing, and I would expect that there will be some news of that within the next week or two. I would also expect that we'll be updated so that we can prepare as well as to how that is going to affect us in terms of any manpower needs around traffic, security, or health issues or concerns that we may have here. So there has been a lot of layoffs and furloughs already. I will anticipate that if they get to the point where there are notice requirements triggered by federal law, that those letters will go out to employees, and that there will be some sort of a public announcement should that occur, that we would see. But as we sit here now, we have been in contact, and as I said, I don't think we're going to be able to resolve any finality as discussions we've been having as to our revenue until we get more concrete answers of when they're going to be opening, and seeing how that's going to occur. So I know that that's a lot more than just the single question you have, but I hope that provides some useful information for you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Solicitor, and thank you, Councilor Williams. Councilor Walsh, we'll let you ask the last question before we go around and hear the rest of the updates, so we can make sure to hear those before we move on to our next meeting. So, Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, talking about businesses, I'm of course interested in our small businesses in the city of Springfield, and what we can do to assist businesses that have missed out on some of the grants. Is there more help on the way for small businesses?
Council, I'll take that one right now. So right now, what we've done for the small businesses round 1 and 2 was previous CDBG money. Now we have the new CARES money coming in that could provide us for some flexibility. Until I know what other funding sources are out there, we don't really have a clear indication of how much money will be available directly for small businesses. But once we have that roadmap and that figured out, we will certainly let the council know.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I should be addressing this to you, TJ, or to Tommy, but I recently became aware of a business in Springfield that I think has the potential to be very successful, and that's Hot Oven Cookies. I'm particularly interested in them because they're owned by a woman and a veteran. And I understand that they're in a situation where they need a little bit of help. And I'm hoping there's something out there that will get them over the hump. So I think they have the potential to be very successful.
I think we're aware of that one, Councilor Walsh, and we're certainly trying to work with them. I know Brian Connors has reached out, and but through this first 2 rounds, really we've addressed a lot of needs and a lot of businesses that were hurting, and hopefully provided some relief to them, which I'm sure that it did. And hopefully we'll have a round 3, which what TJ just mentioned, we're very interested in doing should the opportunity present itself in terms of funds.
Would there be a timeline for that line 3 for people that are just sort of hanging on?
Well, we just have to. We have
know
to
when it might be coming
first before we can commit to it, but we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be getting it.
Yes, I know many of the other counselors are concerned about that particular situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilor Walsh and Councilor Whitfield. I do see your hand raised, but if we could just go around and let them finish their updates, and then I'll circle right back around to you, Councilor Whitfield, to ask your question.
It's kind of
TJ,
on the
did you
same
have any-
line as what Catery was talking about.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It'll take
I'll
a quick
defer.
second. Okay,
Sounds
thank
good.
you. Thank you. I just wanted to know, some of the grant awardees had 5 days to turn in some of their requirements and they were unable to. And so some of that money will stay in the pot. Will that have to wait till round 3, Tom, Ed, TJ, or can we look at some of the applicants that are in and maybe try to award them like hot oven?
I think that's the plan, Counselor, to use that for the next round. Those funds, those remaining funds.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilor. Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. TJ, did you have an update? I know we just spoke to you on Tuesday. Did you have any additional information that you wanted to provide the council?
Not really. The Senate's taken up a municipal relief bill to help kind of manage dates for the state budget, to the city budget. And once I know more, I will update the council again next week's meeting.
Thank you. Well, since the solicitor just left, Commissioner, did you have anything that you wanted to update the council on that is not related to the reinstatement of the 5 officers, which we'll get to at the end of this meeting?
Counselor, thank you. The only thing maybe you'd be interested in is current numbers that maybe I can give you now ahead of time. Is today at the teleconference call, I reported I have 10 that are out because of the COVID virus. But I have 12 officers currently out on injured on duty status, 3 that are on light duty status, meaning they can only do inside paperwork. 16 officers have retired since January 1st of this year, and I have 8 pending that will retire before July 1st. So there's 39 officers in that group, besides the 10 that are out with COVID. 1 COVID officer was hospitalized too, Counselor. Hopefully released today, we're hoping.
That is great news. Thank you, Commissioner and Solicitor. Did you have anything that you wanted to update the council on before we open it up to questions again?
Just that, we continue to work with the council and with the other various boards and commissions to have meetings remotely. Seems like it's going pretty good so far. It seems to be expanding. We couldn't do it without the help of Steve and Brendan and Focus Springfield. They have been very helpful. We're going to have some hearings coming up and involving the council and some special permits. So we're hoping that that'll go smoothly. I believe it will. And again, the president has been working very closely with the various departments and staff, particularly the law department, working on this. If anyone has any questions involving any legal aspects, I know there's a process that goes for opinions through the city council, but I would suggest that any of you, feel free to contact me. Well, it's at different times and there's lots of questions and all the processes have to be loosened a little bit. So please feel free to contact me if I can be of any help.
Thank you, Solicitor. We certainly appreciate your help and your partnership in all of this, as well as Focus Springfield, who deserves probably more than what we'll be able to give them with when we get back to our new normal, which would be a proclamation. So if we can do something else for them, we certainly will try to do that. Are there any questions from the council related to any of the updates?
Mr. President, if I not
Councilor Davila, and I think Councilor Walsh had a question after Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. No more of a question more than for the solicitor. Solicitor, later on, I would like to get in touch with you so we can sort of do a quick update on a local company in my district. that has been going on. There is an ongoing issue, noise issue. And I would like to get a full update and get on the same page so that we can convey it over to my constituents as well.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Councilor Walsh.
Thank you again, Council President. Tommy, I think you referred to it briefly about the park and, of course, the governor's directive that everybody wears masks. You know, we're so lucky to have that park because so many people are enjoying it during this crazy time we're in right now. But how, you know, there's so many different ways to get into the park. How are you going to make sure that everybody going in has a mask? Are you going to like stop people and ask them, or is there a procedure?
Yeah, so the openings, you know, the regular openings will be there, but we also have the sheriff's officers over there too with patrol cars. Their prime responsibilities is to kind of make sure people are separating and have, now we'll have masks on and so on. So they're kind of tasked with that, Councilor Walsh. For now, as the nice weather is on the way, it's going to be all that much more difficult. Because it is a beautiful open space and we want people to use it. We want them to use it responsibly. So the Sheriff's Department working under Commissioner Clapper is kind of tasked with that right now to ensure that that's happening. So
yeah, because as you know, there's so many different ways to go into the park besides driving.
That's right, you're right.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. We have Councilor Ramos, followed by Councilor Letterman.
Just on that topic of masks in the park, it's my understanding that the masks are only required when they're when you can't social distance, right? And so it's either one or the other. If you're social distancing, if you're able to be outside and social distance, then you don't have to wear a mask. Correct?
That's correct. Right.
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Councilor Ramos. Councilor Letterman.
I was going to say the same thing as Councilor Ramos.
Okay. Seeing no further questions for the administration regarding our weekly update, we will transition directly into our next meeting. And so councilors who did not want to stay for this meeting, you can certainly leave the meeting at this time. Otherwise, we will we'll transition right into our meeting. Commissioner, if you could just start off by giving us an update with respect to the reinstatement of the 5 officers initially, what led to it, and then more recently, what led to their removal from you, from them being on the streets. And so I think once you give us an update or a synopsis, then what I'll do is I'll open it up for the questions from the council.
Sure. The question of suspending or reinstating any officer is up to the discretion of the commissioner as the appointing authority. The statute that's applicable is chapter 268A, section 25, which indicates that any public employee under indictment may be suspended. When these officers were indicted, it was the commissioner's call, and under her discretion, she did in fact exercise the discretion to suspend these officers, I think to basically show that there was concerns of a cover-up, and she wanted to show that this is not something we would take lightly. So those officers have been suspended over the past year. They have been suspended without pay during that time frame. Some of the officers that are in that group, and again, these are all officers who were on duty at the night. They were not involved in the underlying incident. They were all involved with in a supporting role under the direction of the supervisor who was on duty. Since that time, several of those cases have been dismissed, including the case against the supervisor. who was under indictment and who had been directing all of these other officers. So I think once we got to this level of coronavirus and manpower considerations, the commissioner, she can discuss the process she went through, but I know that she did ask if there was, legally, she could have the power to reinstate them, and she certainly does. That's totally a discretionary function on her part. She decided to suspend them. She could decide to unsuspend them and bring them back. It's been reported in a newspaper that there were discussions with the Attorney General's office who are prosecuting the officers who remain under indictment as to whether we had taken into consideration the federal statute. It's 18 USC section 922, sections D1 and section N, both of which deal with the possession or receipt of weapons in interstate or foreign commerce, and that was not something that had been included in the original opinion. My understanding is the weapons the Springfield Police Department gets come from Smith & Wesson, which is down the street, and there's not some sort of a interstate or foreign commerce type of issue. So that was not an area that we had looked at. But we did look at it, and we are looking at it, and we're preparing an opinion because it did come up, and the commissioner has had concerns. As a result of her concerns, she has made sure that those officers do not have assigned firearms at this point, in an abundance of caution. But so far, our research has shown that 18 USC section 925 provides a law enforcement exception to the law. So even if there was some sort of connection to interstate or foreign commerce, I don't think it applies here. Now, it's one thing to read the statutes on their face and have these concerns. It's another to read all the cases and all the precedents and any guidance we can find from the Department of Justice or any other sources, and that's what we're in the process of doing now. We're going to make sure there's a very thorough review of the issue so that the commissioner has all the legal aspects available to her.
Thank you, Solicitor. Commissioner, did you want to add anything? And I know, Councilor Finn, you have your hand up. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I just want to let you know I was prepared to answer, but I have a couple of good legal eagles here who have warned me about what I can say and what I can't say. It's personnel matters, so it should be executive session. And I've talked to a couple of you on the phone, and I'm glad to talk to you personally. But I will tell you that I did suspend them for a year, and during that time, I have tried to get the evidence that the indictments were based on. I have nothing really factual to tell you, even though I couldn't tell you what these officers have done wrong at this time. I have asked for grand jury minutes. They were indicted based on a grand jury. I have been denied those grand jury minutes. I will tell you, I only started to get information about the cases through sending people to motions and learning a little bit. And that's where your dismissals are starting to come about. And that's where I'm starting to learn the basis of the case. I will tell you, Counselor, that I take this very seriously. I take my position seriously. And I am, despite on the last track of my race around, I take the Springfield Police Department and the city of Springfield their best interest very seriously. And I weigh everything based on fact as I can get it. The decision wasn't made based on emotions. It wasn't based on politics or prejudices. It was based on what I knew about the people involved, what I knew that so far they had supposedly committed and how valuable they were before this incident. Two of the officers I knew very well. One of the females, Siobhan, was very, very great and involved with kids and sexual assaults. And it was heartbreaking when it happened. And when I gave them the initial suspension, if you'd asked me a year from now, the case still wouldn't have been settled. I wouldn't believe it. It has been a tremendous amount of stress. And again, officers who responded that night, who were on duty and went to the call, who were not involved in the initial assault. And these officers, even though back to work for us inside, they still face the criminal charges. These criminal charges are still pending against them. Departmental charges are still pending against them. They have not had to answer to departmental charges because they certainly have the right against self-incrimination, so they haven't answered to IIU yet. So everything is still pending. They are adding to my workforce, and as you know, COVID comes and goes. My numbers go between 39 out to 5. Will it start to stable off? I don't know. But I can be short in other ways. We have a lot of officers out for different reasons. Mass State Police is still here. They are still helping out. They're looking to pull out. They're short themselves. So I'm trying to keep them as long as I can. And as it was wished upon me, I have kept the National Guard to a very limited role here in Springfield. They have simply been assisting in the tents and the homeless. And that's why I predict they'll stay and not patrolling the streets of Springfield. So it's us, it's the Mass State Police. There was mention of 34 recruits that got out. If there's any liability or worry about the city as far as action taken by police officers, there it is. You have 34 recruits who are out, but who are very inexperienced. And because we have a young department, I did not choose to put them back into the squads. Your average experience time for someone now that works midnight to 8 is approximately 2.5 years. That's not a lot of experience. So I have divided them up into groups of 4 or 6, and they are all around the department. They are learning different areas of the department from some of the best. That rotation will end September 4th. And then you will have what I think are some 34 very well-rounded individual officers, a lot better than what they are now. They are brand new and right out of the academy. So, yeah, we're still in one-man cars. I think the COVID has come and gone, and we've had different outbreaks, but I think we've really been able to keep it from running through the department the way we organize, with one-man cars in 5 different locations. We're not all at 130 Pearl Street. We're in 5 different locations, and I'm trying to maintain that one-man car concept so that the officers are pretty secluded, and if I have a little outbreak, I can control it much better. But the 5 officers, after I get the opinion, if they can be armed, I didn't want to take that chance. I'll wait for the legal opinions and go by what they tell me. Right now, they're in the station. They're very productive. They were good officers before this incident. And as I said, Siobhan Lewis is back helping domestic violence people. James Demore is back helping the Detective Bureau and running around and doing different errands for them. And there's places where I need them, where I can send officers out because they are inside. So, and again, they still will face the criminal charges. They're still pending, and they still will face departmental charges. So that was basically the reasoning. I can't go into what I've learned from different court actions because I can't talk about the case, so it's difficult. But from what I've learned, I would talk to you separately or independently, and I have to a couple of you, but in this forum, I can't talk about the case.
Thank you, Tom. I also see we're joined by Attorney G, as well as Daryl Moss, looks like, from the mayor's office. Tom, did you want to add anything before I open it up to Councilor Fenton and Councilor Ramos, who have their hands raised, or did you want anyone else to add anything?
No, I just thought it was important when we went over the commissioner's numbers today to take into consideration retirements and all those other things that have depleted her numbers, and that these new recruits unfortunately aren't directly out to the street, learning, in the squad cars. Just can't have that right now. So we're glad that they're here. The infusion is good, but unfortunately, we can't use them the way we would have liked to. So the numbers are still down, and Commissioner's doing the best she can with the numbers that she has. So thank you.
Council, I'll clarify too, these 5 that came back have not received any back pay, and they're not entitled to it until their cases are dismissed in court.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. So I'll open it up for questions. Councilor Fitton, followed by Councilor Ramos, and then Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Commissioner, for that summary. My question is basically a process one, primarily for the solicitor. It seems to me like that, well, as the Commissioner highlighted in her opening remarks, that this is a personnel matter that involves some particular employees of the city. And I'm wondering if you could just, before we go any further, I probably should have said this before the Commissioner even spoke, but about what we can discuss in open session about this and what we can't.
Yeah, so as you point out, there are rules involving the discussion of personnel matters in public, that if you are discussing an employee, they're entitled to various notices. They're entitled to have it in executive session, in general, the city council, jurisdiction over employee discipline is limited to their staff and not to other departments. They don't play a role in the appointing or disciplinary process. So it would not be normal to have an executive session on that issue. And it would not be normal that even, the point is, even in executive session, we wouldn't be discussing various employees explicitly. But the names are out there. It has been a subject of a lot of public debate and speculation. I hope that the general information we've provided today helps clarify a lot of that. If you do have very particular concerns, we certainly want to have your input, and in particular the Commissioner, as it rests on her shoulders, and I think she's made some difficult decisions. I know that she didn't do it without consultation as to the legal aspects, and also as to the community aspects, and for things such as discussing it with the district attorney's office, and making sure that their concerns there were okay. I think a general discussion, I think she's properly referred to the importance that some of these officers have had to the department in the past. I think that certainly proper to raise, but in terms of getting into the disciplinary aspects, particularly since she's the one that's going to be judging them when this is all over. We're going to have the guidance of the CPHB, and who will have their own guidance through a retired Justice of the Superior Court, Bertha Josephson, that the matter is not even being pursued or prosecuted, I should say, internally, whereas the Labor Relations typically does it. An independent prosecutor has been appointed here. The initial was Tom Kokanowski. Now it's Patrick Markey who has taken over those duties. So we still got a long way to go on this, and we want to make sure that the process, that we do dot the I's and cross the T's, so that everyone's rights are protected. I should point out that includes the city's rights. As we sit here now, these officers were not paid for a year. Now that they're back, they are being paid again. The ones that have been dismissed, we have made payments to those officers for the time that they were uncompensated. And if this goes another year as we expect till 2021, then all the officers will be entitled to their back pay as well. So those are some of the legal aspects that play into this. I'll be happy to answer any other questions, and some of them it might be more appropriate that we talk offline.
Thank you, Solicitor. Did that answer your question, Councilor Fenton? Or...
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
So we'll defer to you, Solicitor, if we, if we veer into an area that you think should be talked about in executive session, then we'll let you inform us. Councilor Ramos.
Mr. President, thank you. Attorney Pequilla, you mentioned that you're still doing your legal research and working on a legal opinion in regards to this case. I'm just wondering what the purpose of that is, or is the
aspect. The issue, it's been raised as to whether these officers should have firearms or not under the federal law. So that's
sure. So I guess my question is, what is the purpose of all of this research, and are we trying to put these officers back on the streets? Is that what this is about?
I want to make sure that whatever decision the counselor, the commissioner needs, that we have counseled her properly on the law. So, she's entitled to the best legal advice we can give her, and she'll know all of the rights and remedies. She might be faced with challenges by officers who don't like their assignment, who seek some sort of civil service review, some collective bargaining grievance, whatever it may be. We just want to make sure we're on solid grounds with whatever advice we provide to the police department.
So I guess I'll direct my question to the commissioner then. Commissioner, is the intent to bring these officers back on the streets?
If I'm able to do so, Councilor Ramos, they're more valuable to me out on the street. I just don't want to. I wouldn't do it, and I won't take a chance if there's any gray area with that, or I'm advised not to. They do fill a need inside the station. So if the answer is from my law department that no, Cheryl, I wouldn't do that, or I advise you not to, then they still are valuable to me inside.
I guess I'm wondering what the urgency is. Is the urgency because of the officers, or is the urgency on behalf of the city? Where's the urgency to bring these officers back on the streets to?
I don't think there's any urgency. I think that's why we've set a big pause button here, and they're understanding, and nobody's been knocking on my door to get them out. They probably have personal reasons why they would like to. It would involve all the overtime. If they're trying to do something extra or work an extra job, or they cannot do that if they do not have a weapon, that's hurting them a little bit in that regard. If I got so short as to I really needed them to be armed to help me out, I'd like to have a direct and responsible answer if I can do that. We don't even have the officer who is manned at the front window. When this lobby should open up, right now it's closed. You still get a few people come in. Even that officer is armed for obvious reasons. People run in the station being chased by people and telling us they're robbed. So that officer is even armed. So it limits me a little bit, but with the body-worn camera program coming up next week or the week after, there's spots for them now. There's no urgency on my part.
Okay, so there's no urgency.
Not on my part, no. Not at this time.
Now, what were these officers? You rehired them on April 19th, and then, or they returned to work on April 19th, and then they were taken off the streets on May 1st. And so, what were they doing in that period of time?
What were the officers doing?
Yes.
That 1 week, they weren't actually working. They were back in service training. They were all recertifying. They actually never did hit the street as officers with their weapons. They were back in service training. It was a week in training. And Attorney Pakula took the call and he can tell you.
So Councilor Ramos, there are a number of other counselors with their hands raised. If you could conclude with a question or a thought, and then we'll try to circle back around to you once everybody has had an opportunity to ask a question or two.
Those were my main questions, Mr. President. I'll defer to the other counselors, and I may come back with another question. But at this point, I'll hold off.
Thank you, Councilor Ramos. Councilor Gomez, followed by Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Commissioner, for taking this time to sit with us. My question is specific to, I know that following the story, it was a staffing issue while you made the decision to bring some of these individuals back. My question is specific to, outside of these 5 individuals, do you have a number of other officers that have been suspended or maybe not indicted that are being reprimanded at the moment, that are sitting home without a gun, that could have, could be part of a next wave of, let's say we did have an outbreak, or folks that we went down and we didn't have. I know that I wrote a letter to the editor from before, specifically trying to figure out how we can utilize the LED division to do some of these runaround things, like, instead of using our guys to go transport officers, because I know nobody stays inside of at our jail on Pearl Street anymore. But is there any specific number, or is there a specific number of other officers that you have that are suspended or off duty for some reason that you could have brought back other than these 5?
Not that I know of, Council. The only other ones suspended right now are your other Nathan Bill's officers that were involved in the actual fight.
So from your knowledge, you don't know of any other officers that are off duty for some kind of disciplinary issue that are not working, other than those 5 individuals, other than the other involved in the Nathan Bill's incident, right?
Yeah, the only other one, Councilor, might be Officer Greg Victor.
All right.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. Councilor Whitfield, followed by Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here, and everyone else. I have a couple questions. My first one is, when the officers go on desk duty, is their pay the same?
What was the question, Councilor? I'm sorry.
Is their pay the same? Their salaries the same when they're on desk duty?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then my second question is the Quebec team, they're not in the schools right now. Are they reassigned? And how many officers is that?
There's about 14 of them, Councilor. They are reassigned, but most of them, 4 of their hours a day are helping with the food distribution. They work Monday through Friday. They're helping Dan Warwick and the school department. There's many locations in the school where they're handing out 15 locations, thank you, in the school where they hand out lunch meals. Actually, it's providing them all 3 meals, right, and snacks. Mm-hmm. And they have to socially distance. They have to line up, and each of the Quebec officers are assigned a location, and they do that between some 10:30, some 11 o'clock, and they get done at 1 or 1:30. We've been using them for that, and some will start to be reassigned to the summer school locations as Dan Warwick needs them.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is to you personally. Do you think that bringing these officers back sets a precedent for folks that may be suspended or in an indictment situation? Do you think it sets a precedent to bring any type of worker, I mean, not just police, but any type of worker back to their job when they're under investigation?
I don't, Counselor. I weighed this decision heavily, and I had suspended them for 1 year without pay based on the charges. Some of their co-defendants, the cases have been dismissed, and like I said, I can't tell you about the case, but there were other factors in bringing these officers back. I take this decision very seriously, and I will judge it on facts and individually, not on precedents. I don't use emotions, as I said, or politics or race. Springfield is the most diverse police department in Massachusetts, so I'm looking out for everybody equally, and I see no precedents here, no ma'am.
All right, thank you for answering that. My final statement is, you know, in some of the press releases and things, it may seem that we were attacking you, but we weren't. We were attacking the process. And also, you made a comment that we should have came to you and asked, you know, some questions of you. We feel the same way. You could have told us before you reinstated the officers that this was going to happen. Not that you had to, and not that we have to ask you, but if we're going to have a mutual relationship, I think things can go both ways. So we're not caught off guard, because we were also caught off guard with the decision, and we didn't know that the process was happening. So we want to.
I agree, Counselor, and you know, it's just that the department is 500 plus men and women, and I make so many decisions, you know, and I make them with the facts that I have at hand, and I make them fairly and equally. And I understand your concerns, and I was just hoping that if you had concerns like that, because we are talking about personnel and we're talking about discipline, and we are talking about a case that has not yet come to fruition or court, that would be the way I would have to explain it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner, thank you for being here today answering these questions. I oftentimes have mentioned to you that I don't run the departments. I certainly don't run the police department. But I think kind of piggybacking what Councilor Whitfield was saying, this is a decision that raised a lot of eyebrows and brought many, many valid concerns, particularly how to protect the city. Now, just to refresh my memory, these 5 officers, they're being charged with perjury, correct?
And can I talk about the term?
You know, I'll send you copies of the indictments so you can review those. But no, we're not going to talk about specific cases here of individuals and what they're charged with. There has been public information. The indictments are public. I'll send them to you, but it's not appropriate for open discussion.
Councilor Solicitor, that's not, thank you for that reminder. That's not what I'm trying to get at. For the information, for the public information that has been put out on the papers regarding these particular 5 officers, was that perjury charge? Can you say that?
I'll send you the indictments and you can review them. We're not going to talk about the individual charges of any individual officer.
Okay, so you basically telling me you don't feel comfortable telling me what might have been in the public arena.
I'm not going to. I don't have anything in front of me. I'm not going to say my recollection is, this is what I think. I'm certainly happy to give you all of that information.
Okay.
And I can, like I said, I'll email you copies of the indictments.
Okay. I will appreciate if you could do that. Just to be clear, because so that I can ask pertinent, appropriate questions here. This is the forum that we have. Now, so Commissioner, did you say those officers, are they in the station or are they in the Quebec team right now, outside?
They're in the station, Councilor. There's none of them are in the Quebec unit.
Okay. Can you tell exactly what function they're fulfilling? What kind of clerical function they're fulfilling right now?
Sure, they're fulfilling office duties and office work and getting reports and preparing reports and talking to individuals. And 2 of the officers were specialized investigators. They know a lot about giving advice, especially to sexual assault and domestic violence victims. They're fulfilling those roles.
Okay. So I realize that the solicitor is going to send me the indictments, but my concern is, if my recollection is correct, they're being charged with perjury. And what I'm getting at, do you see any possible situation? One of my biggest concerns is that these officers might find themselves back in court testifying on something they were doing in the clerical function?
No, and I'll tell you, Council, it's a good question and a good concern, but they also have not been found guilty of any charges.
Correct. But my big concern is that I'm not a lawyer, but if I was a lawyer, the first thing that I would do is to tear them apart.
I'm a lawyer, and I can tell you that would not be admissible, the fact that someone's charged with a crime, and that would not get into the evidence. This has been gone over with the district attorney's offices. The district attorney is comfortable with the situation.
Right, which council goes back to with the suggestion the Councilor Whitfield made that the council should have been made aware of this before this, so we don't have to ask these questions now. But it is what it is, and we're here now. So I'm just trying to think, because you brought up, Commissioner, you brought up Bigda. And I know in Bigda, his situation, there were tons of cases that were dismissed because his integrity was questioned. So help me to understand, because I really don't understand. How is that different?
Well, because those questions involve prosecution of cases that he was involved with and was going to question him about what happened on the scene. And that there are no prosecutions going on involving Nathan Bills or anything like that. So he's got a right to remain silent, and so it's difficult to prosecute a case where someone's being questioned about their right to remain silent. Totally different situation.
Right. Councilor Davila, if we could just wrap up.
Yeah, my last question is, my last thank you, Mr. President. This is a great conversation, by the way, great information. It is, particularly when you caught off guard. My final question is, I'm trying to help. My understanding is, and no, again, we go back to solicitor, you're going to send me those indictment. But as far as I know, they're charged with a felony. How is that different from the original officers that are also charged with a felony? How do we balance? I don't understand. I really don't understand how we bring one set of officers and we don't bring the others.
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the details of what the charges are, but none of the officers that have come back were involved in any of the assaults, and all of the charges stem from officers who were on duty and responding to the scene. So that's the distinction that the commissioner has made, and that was a distinction that she made when she decided to suspend them and hold them out for a year. And that was in her consideration, deciding it's time for them to come back. So that's part of the equation. I think she's answered that. I think we've gone over this. If you want to know details about the applicability of law and what evidence is admissible, I'll be happy to go over that with you, but not in a session of the meeting.
Yeah, and finally, I just want to say that it sounds to me that we indeed should have an executive session with this, Mr. President. Oh, thank you.
I'm not going to go over that in executive session either. I'll go over it with you and be happy to talk to you about it. But it's not appropriate to go over personnel stuff in the city council's jurisdiction, in that they don't do appointments or disciplinary. I can talk to you about the general process. I can talk to you about the law, but we're not going to talk about individual cases of who did what. We didn't do that with Bigda, and we're not going to do that with this.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I also want to thank you, Commissioner, for joining this call in terms of discussing about this matter. I know you have difficult decisions to make, some of which we don't always agree with, but you're there making them. And that's my question is grounded in the process. So in your initial decision to decide whether to arm the police officers and reinstating them, did you seek a legal opinion from the city on whether that was admissible?
So I think I told you already that was not part of the discussion. That's a federal statute. The statute applies to interstate and foreign commerce. That wasn't an issue that we looked at the time. The question that was requested was what discretion under 268A does she have to bring them back? That was addressed, and she exercised her discretion within the confines of that opinion. The opinion we're dealing with now is this issue that has been raised to us by the Attorney General's office, and that's what we're working on to make sure she has the guidance there. That was not part of any initial discussion.
Okay, so just to follow up to that, Ed, do you see any blowback or anything that might be pending coming down the road based on her discretion that was exercised?
Blowback or what?
In terms of, well, the FBI and the attorneys general, it's been reported that they said the city broke the law.
No. I don't think that's been reported, and no one has said that to me. My discussion was, you know, to look at these statutes. And so
I literally just read that in.
No one said anyone broke the law. All this said is, have you looked at these statutes? And that's what we're doing. And as I said, they looked at two statutes, section 18 USC 922D1 and 18 USC 922N. I did look at those statutes. I read them on their face as to the their jurisdictional aspects with interstate commerce or foreign commerce, none of which seems to be applicable here. And then I looked at the and I continue to look at the law enforcement exception, which is in 18 USC section 925. And it would appear that that law enforcement, that those statutes, 922D1 and 922N, don't apply to any law enforcement official, whether it be federal or state or a political subdivision thereof. Now, I'm going to keep looking and keep reviewing and until I can feel confident that I can give her an opinion that she can rely on. And in the meantime, it's been her decision to make sure that they aren't assigned weapons, whether they came from down the street at Smith & Wesson or anywhere else.
I appreciate that response, Ed. I know what I read, and you know it definitely alludes to the fact of what I just mentioned.
Well, I don't deal with illusions. I want to deal with facts.
Okay, and I also want to deal with the fact that I feel that the rest of this conversation should take place in executive session, because I think there's a lot of, and I agree with Councilor Fenton's point, that there's a lot being discussed that I don't think the press should be privy to or the public. And I'll leave that right there.
So much appreciated, Councilor Williams. Councilor Whitfield, Councilor Whitfield, I'm going to let Councilor Letterman speak, who hasn't spoken thus far. And then we'll circle back around to Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize that I will have to leave the meeting in the next several minutes for another meeting at 1 o'clock. I agree with the councilors that have raised concerns relative to the discussion that's taking place. I think it's important that this discussion take place, but I am concerned about delving into an area that is more appropriate for executive session. And for that reason, I will simply say at this time, and I would have more questions in an executive session, but I'd say at this time that I am concerned with the process that's been described, and I am concerned with the fact that this has caused so much consternation in the community and in our government. So I think that there is a bigger discussion to be had relative to this, but I agree it may need to be in executive session to protect everybody's rights, including that of the councilors involved in the discussion and the city itself. So I'll end my comments there, but I do hope that we have the opportunity to have a further discussion in an appropriate setting.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you. My question is to Attorney Pakula. It's not about anything personal, but you keep saying that you spoke to the district attorney. I spoke to the district attorney, and I want to know what that's supposed to mean to us, because the district attorney in 2017 decided not to prosecute, and this went to the Mass Attorney General's office. So I want to know, why do you keep saying that you discussed this with the district attorney? The district attorney's office did not do their own fact finding to obtain the reports or whatever that they needed to get, and it went to the Mass Attorney General's office. So what is that supposed to mean when you say I have already consulted with the district attorney's office?
Number one, I did not speak with the district attorney. I never said I spoke with the district attorney.
You did. I wrote it down exactly when you said it. And hold on. You're being aggressive when we ask you something and when you speak back.
Whitfield,
hold on, no, let me finish. When I talk to you, when I ask you something, is in a professional manner. I felt you got aggressive with Counselor Williams. We're having a conversation here. So if you could please turn down the attitude a little bit and answer the question, that would be great.
Let's get to the question and comment, Counselor Whitfield. Can you ask it again, ma'am?
You said I spoke with the district attorney a couple of times. Somebody mentioned something. You said, we already spoke with the district attorney. I'm not going to release this information. We spoke to the district attorney. Every time you said it, I wrote it down. That is what you said. We could probably play it back on Focus Springfield, or you could go back and look at it. So I just want to know, why are you mentioning the district attorney?
So, Solicitor, are you saying that you did not mention the district attorney? And if so, then we can end the conversation there?
Number one, the commissioner spoke with the district attorney because of her concerns of having these officers reinstated and the impact it may have on cases that may be prosecuted where they're involved. That is why the issue is important. It's important to the community to know what the impact would be on cases, and the commissioner looked into that. That is not something that I talked to the district attorney about. If I said I spoke to, I apologize. I did not speak to the district attorney about that issue, but I know the commissioner did.
Thank you, Solicitor.
Council President, we are amenable to executive session, as has been suggested by some of your members, if it makes sense, which it seems to us probably does make sense. So I would leave that to you, but we are certainly amenable to that.
Much appreciated, and we will definitely follow up in executive session for sure, if that is the will of the body. Counselor Williams, followed by, it looks like it's just Counselor Williams. Counselors, we have roughly 15 minutes remaining, and so I just want to be mindful of the commissioner's time as well as everyone else's time. Counselor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to end on this point. Ed, this is for you, reported directly by Mass Live. To my point, Springfield Police Commissioner Clapper confirmed FBI agents and Assistant State Attorney General called the city attorney this week to say that the department was breaking the law by allowing officers to return to work with guns while still under indictment. That's my point. So if you still want to refute it, you can, but then you're also refuting the comments that by Commissioner Clapper. So please, the floor is yours, because that is exactly what I read.
I never said that, and I never heard them say you're breaking the law. So I will refute that.
Thank you, Counselor Williams. Thank you, Solicitor. Counselor Letterman, I see your hand is raised.
Just relative to Tom's comment, I would request that we have another hearing and that it be posted appropriately in executive session. If you need a request from a member, I would make that request.
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Letterman. Are there any other questions from counselors? Seeing none, I will thank you so much for your time, Commissioner Tom, the Solicitor, Attorney G, and Daryl. We certainly appreciate it, and we will reconvene next Monday. Counselors, have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.